Baby found German Shepherd's ears and tail, cut off for fun. What Baby did next left everyone in tears. The moment little Ethan found the bleeding dog hidden under fallen branches, everything changed forever. What this brave 5-year-old did next shocked everyone and broke hearts across the nation. This is a story that will make you believe in humanity again. The summer sun beat down through the canopy of oak trees as 5-year-old Ethan Miller ventured deeper into the woods behind his grandmother's country home. His small fingers clutched a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a lunch that Grandma Ellie had prepared before leaving for her hospital shift. Ethan wasn't supposed to wander this far, but something had caught his attention, a strange whimpering sound carried by the gentle breeze. "Hello?" Ethan called out, his voice small against the vastness of nature surrounding him. Birds continued their songs overhead, indifferent to the boy's presence, but the whimpering stopped abruptly. Ethan froze, his sneakers sinking slightly into the soft earth near the creek bank. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the way the air seemed to hold its breath. His curious brown eyes scanned the underbrush until they landed on a fallen tree, its massive trunk creating a natural shelter. From beneath it, 2 eyes watched him, intelligent, wary, and filled with a pain that Ethan, despite his young age, recognized immediately. "Are you hurt?" he whispered, taking a cautious step forward. The creature, a large German shepherd, flinched but didn't growl. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs as he inched closer, and the full horror of what he was seeing became clear. The dog's ears had been cut off, leaving raw, crusted wounds. Where a tail should have been was another bloody stump. Both injuries looked deliberate, the work of someone who enjoyed causing pain. Ethan's small hands trembled, but not from fear, from a rage so pure and overwhelming that tears sprang to his eyes. Who would do this? Who could hurt an animal this way? "I won't hurt you," Ethan promised, his voice cracking. "I'm not like them." The dog's eyes, amber and intelligent, studied the boy. There was something in those eyes, a wisdom, a capacity for judgment that Ethan sensed immediately. This wasn't just any dog. This was a soul who understood. Ethan knelt in the dirt, still maintaining a safe distance. He unwrapped his sandwich and tore off a small piece. "Are you hungry? It's peanut butter. My grandma says it's brain food." He placed the morsel on the ground between them and backed away. The dog didn't move toward the food, but its eyes never left Ethan's face. Minutes passed in a silent standoff until Ethan realized his approach needed to change. He opened his Spider-Man backpack and pulled out his water bottle. "You must be thirsty too." He poured some water into the bottle cap and placed it beside the sandwich piece. The dog's tongue darted out, licking dry, cracked lips. Slowly, painfully, it dragged itself forward just enough to lap at the water. Ethan's heart soared, but he kept his excitement contained, instinctively knowing that sudden movements or loud noises would shatter this fragile trust. "You're so brave," Ethan whispered, as the dog finished the water and cautiously took the bit of sandwich. "Like a warrior in the movies. That's what I'll call you. Warrior." Warrior, the name seemed to fit the dog who, despite unimaginable cruelty, still found the courage to trust. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Ethan knew he would soon need to return home before Grandma Ellie finished her shift. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving Warrior alone, injured and vulnerable. "I have to go home now," he explained, as if the dog could understand every word. "But I'll come back tomorrow, I promise." Warrior's eyes seemed to dim with disappointment, or perhaps it was just Ethan's imagination. On impulse, the boy reached into his backpack and pulled out Rex, his stuffed dinosaur that had helped him through countless thunderstorms and the terrible days after his parents' accident. "Rex will stay with you," Ethan said firmly, placing the well-loved toy near Warrior. "He's really good at keeping nightmares away." As Ethan stood to leave, Warrior made a small noise, not quite a whine, but a sound of acknowledgement. Something passed between boy and dog in that moment, a contract sealed without words. Ethan had made a promise, and Warrior would hold him to it. "I'll be back," Ethan repeated. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." As he walked home, Ethan's mind raced with questions. Who had hurt Warrior? Why? And more importantly, what could he, a 5-year-old with limited resources, do to help? One thing was certain. Adults couldn't be trusted with this secret, not yet. They might take Warrior away, or worse, put him down because of his injuries. No, Ethan would need to handle this himself, at least until Warrior was stronger. The Miller family's white farmhouse came into view as Ethan emerged from the woods. It was nothing fancy, peeling paint in some spots, a porch that creaked under the slightest weight, but it had been home since the accident that took his parents 2 years ago. Grandma Ellie's ancient station wagon wasn't in the driveway yet, which meant he had made it back before her shift ended. Relief washed over him. Inside, Ethan went straight to the bathroom and stared at his reflection in the mirror. Dirt smudged his cheeks, and his usually neatly combed hair stuck out in all directions. Grandma would ask questions if she saw him like this. He quickly washed his face and hands, changed his dirty shirt, and tried to smooth his hair with water. "Mission accomplished," he whispered to himself, practicing the phrase he had learned from his favorite cartoon. That night, as Grandma Ellie served mac and cheese, Ethan's favorite, her sharp eyes noticed something different about her grandson. "You're quiet tonight, sunshine," she said, reaching across the table to feel his forehead. "Not coming down with something, are you?" Ethan shook his head, just tired from playing. "Where's Rex?" Ellie asked suddenly, noticing the absence of the stuffed dinosaur that usually sat in the chair next to Ethan during dinner. Ethan's spoon clattered against his bowl. I put him away. I'm too big for stuffed animals now." Ellie's eyebrows rose in surprise, but she didn't push. "5 is very grown-up indeed," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Working long hours as a hospital administrator left her perpetually exhausted, dark circles permanently etched beneath her kind eyes. Since losing her daughter and son-in-law, Ellie had thrown herself into work, partly from necessity and partly to outrun grief. After dinner, Ethan helped clear the table, a chore he usually complained about, and asked to go to bed early. This raised another flag for Ellie, but she assumed he was just having one of those days when the absence of his parents felt heavier than usual. She tucked him in with an extra tight hug. "I love you to the moon and back," she whispered, their nightly ritual. "And to the stars and home again," Ethan finished, his eyes already drifting closed. But sleep didn't come. As soon as Grandma's footsteps faded down the hallway, Ethan's eyes snapped open. He had planning to do. First, he needed supplies. Warrior's wounds looked bad, really bad. Ethan had watched enough times as Grandma cleaned and bandaged his own cuts and scrapes to know the basics. Clean the wound, put on medicine, cover it up. But he would need supplies from the bathroom. Carefully, he slipped out of bed and tiptoed down the hall. The bathroom cabinet creaked loudly as he opened it, freezing him in place. After a moment of held breath, he continued his mission. Alcohol wipes, just a few, so Grandma wouldn't notice. A small tube of antibiotic ointment, nearly empty anyway. Some gauze pads and a roll of bandages. He couldn't take too much of anything or Grandma would notice, but a little bit from each package might go undetected. With his contraband secured in a plastic sandwich bag, Ethan returned to his room and hid everything in his backpack. Next, he needed food for Warrior. The dog was skinny, too skinny, ribs visible even in the brief glimpse Ethan had gotten. From his secret stash of treats hidden in a shoebox under his bed, Ethan selected a few granola bars and a bag of beef jerky that Uncle Mike had given him last Christmas. With supplies gathered, Ethan finally allowed himself to sleep, but his dreams were troubled, filled with Warrior's intelligent eyes and mysterious shadows that seemed to be hunting them both. Morning came with the distant rumble of thunder. Rain was on its way. Ethan's eyes opened at first light, his mind immediately racing to Warrior. Would the fallen tree provide enough shelter from the coming storm? Would the stuffed dinosaur be enough comfort against the thunder? Grandma Ellie's schedule was a blessing today. She had an early morning meeting and would leave before Ethan even had to pretend to be asleep. On days like this, Mrs. Donovan from next door would come over at 8 to make Ethan breakfast and watch him until his afternoon tutor arrived. Mrs. Donovan was nice but nearly deaf and usually dozed off in front of the TV after serving breakfast. It would be easy to slip away. Sure enough, by 6:30 a.m., Grandma Ellie poked her head into Ethan's room. "I'm heading out early today, sunshine. Mrs. Donovan will be here soon. You can sleep a bit longer if you want." She pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Be good today." Ethan nodded sleepily, feeling a pang of guilt for the deception to come. As soon as he heard the front door close and Grandma's car pull away, he sprang into action. He dressed quickly, stuffed his backpack with the medical supplies and food, and added a small blanket from the linen closet. Mrs. Donovan wouldn't arrive for another hour. Plenty of time to check on Warrior and come back. The morning air felt heavy with impending rain as Ethan retraced his steps to the creek. The forest looked different in the early light. More shadows, more secrets. A twig snapped somewhere to his left, making him jump, but it was just a squirrel, watching him with curious eyes before scampering up a tree. "Warrior," Ethan called softly as he approached the fallen tree. "It's me, Ethan. I came back like I promised." For a heart-stopping moment, nothing moved. Had Warrior managed to drag himself away? Had someone else found him? Or worse, had his injuries been too severe? Then a slight movement, the stuffed dinosaur shifting as Warrior's head emerged from beneath the log. The dog looked even worse in the morning light. The wounds were angry and red, some areas oozing, but most shocking was the recognition in those amber eyes. The dog remembered Ethan, and more importantly, remembered his kindness. "I brought stuff to help you," Ethan said, kneeling and opening his backpack. He laid out his supplies with the serious concentration of a surgeon preparing for an operation. "This might hurt a little, but Grandma always says medicine has to sting to work." Warrior watched every movement, making no attempt to flee as Ethan inched closer. The trust being placed in him made Ethan's hands shake with responsibility. Starting with the least damaged areas, Ethan cleaned the dried blood as gently as he could. Warrior flinched but didn't snap or growl, even when the alcohol wipes clearly caused pain. Ethan worked methodically, whispering encouragement as he went. "You're doing so great. You're the bravest dog ever." As he cleaned around Warrior's neck, Ethan discovered something he hadn't noticed before, a worn leather collar, half hidden by matted fur. The tag was partially legible. M.A. was all he could make out. The rest had been scratched off deliberately. "Your name starts with Ma?" Ethan wondered aloud. "Max? Mac? Maybe Major?" Warrior's ears, or what remained of them, twitched slightly at the last suggestion. "Major?" Ethan repeated, and again the dog reacted. "Was that your name? Major?" But Ethan decided it didn't matter. To him, this dog would always be Warrior, named for his strength and resilience. As he continued cleaning, Ethan discovered something else strange, a small, hard object embedded under the skin at the back of Warrior's neck. It didn't look like any injury. It felt artificial, like something put there on purpose. Ethan decided not to touch it, afraid of causing more pain. With the wounds cleaned and medicine applied, Ethan offered Warrior water from a collapsible dog bowl he'd taken from the garage, left over from Grandma's old dog who had died before Ethan came to live with her, and some of the beef jerky. Warrior ate cautiously at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. "I have to go back now," Ethan said regretfully as the last piece of jerky disappeared. "Mrs. Donovan will be looking for me, but I'll come back again, I promise." The first fat raindrop hit Ethan's cheek as he repacked his supplies. Looking at the fallen tree, he realized it wouldn't provide adequate shelter in a real downpour. Making a quick decision, Ethan arranged the blanket he'd brought into a makeshift tent, using branches to hold it up over Warrior. "This should keep you drier," he said, not entirely convinced but doing his best. "I'll try to find something better tomorrow." As if understanding the coming storm's danger, Warrior gave Ethan's hand a gentle lick, the first real sign of affection. The simple gesture nearly brought tears to Ethan's eyes. He ran all the way home, rain beginning to fall in earnest, and slipped in through the back door, just as Mrs. Donovan's ancient blue Buick pulled into the driveway. His first secret mission had been a success. Over the next few days, Ethan established a routine. Early mornings before Mrs. Donovan arrived, and late afternoons after his tutor left were dedicated to Warrior. Each visit showed improvement, the wounds slowly healing, Warrior's energy returning bit by bit. The dog still couldn't walk properly, but he was eating well, and even wagged the stump where his tail had been when Ethan appeared. But their sanctuary wasn't as secret as Ethan believed. On the fourth day, as he knelt beside Warrior changing bandages, the snap of a twig made them both look up sharply. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs as he scanned the trees, half expecting to see the monster who had hurt Warriors in the first place. Instead, he glimpsed a black truck driving slowly down the county road that ran parallel to the woods, about 50 yards away. Something about the vehicle made Warrior tense immediately, a low growl rumbling in his chest, the first aggressive sound Ethan had heard from him. "What is it, boy?" Ethan whispered, instinctively moving closer to the dog, one small hand resting protectively on Warrior's back. The truck moved past, but the damage was done. Their safe place felt violated somehow, as if they were being watched. Ethan found himself looking over his shoulder more frequently as he made his way home, unable to shake the feeling of unseen eyes tracking his movements. That night, he struggled to sleep, his mind filled with questions. It wasn't just about helping Warrior heal anymore. There was a mystery here, the strange object under the skin, the partially obscured name tag, Warrior's reaction to the black truck. Something bigger was happening, and somehow, Ethan had landed right in the middle of it. As he finally drifted off, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. He couldn't do this alone anymore. He needed help. But who could he trust? Not Grandma Ellie, not yet. She would mean well, but would insist on calling animal control or the police. And Ethan's gut told him that might put Warrior in even more danger. The answer came the next day in the form of his summer tutor, Ms. Sophia Rivera. Young, kind, and sharper than most adults gave her credit for, Ms. Rivera had been working with Ethan 3 afternoons a week to keep his reading skills sharp over the summer. Unlike most grown-ups, she actually listened when Ethan spoke and never dismissed his ideas as childish fantasies. Their session started normally enough. They sat at the kitchen table with books and worksheets spread before them. But Ethan couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting to Warrior, alone in the woods. "Ethan, Earth to Ethan," Ms. Rivera's voice broke through his thoughts. "You seem a million miles away today. Is everything okay?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan responded automatically, the polite answer Grandma had taught him. Ms. Rivera set down her pencil. "You know, when I was your age, I had a secret hiding place in my backyard, a place where I could go when I needed to think or when something was bothering me." Her dark eyes studied him carefully. "Do you have a place like that, Ethan?" Something in her tone, in the genuine interest behind her question, made Ethan's carefully constructed wall begin to crumble. He looked down at his hands, noticing for the first time the small scratches from branches and the dirt still embedded under his fingernails, despite his attempts to wash thoroughly. Ms. Rivera noticed too. She gently turned his hands over, examining the small wounds. "These don't look like regular play scratches, Ethan. And you've been distracted all week." Her voice wasn't accusatory, just concerned. "Whatever's going on, I might be able to help. That's what adults are supposed to do, you know, help kids when they need it." Ethan bit his lip, torn between his promise to protect Warrior and the growing realization that he was in over his head. What if the wounds got infected? What if the person who hurt Warrior came back? What if the black truck was looking for him? "If I tell you," he finally whispered, "you have to promise not to tell Grandma. Not yet." Ms. Rivera's forehead creased with concern, but she nodded slowly. "Unless someone is in danger, I promise to keep your secret. But Ethan, if someone is hurt or in trouble, we might need to tell your grandmother eventually." That seemed fair. Ethan took a deep breath and looked directly into Ms. Rivera's eyes. "I found a dog in the woods. Someone hurt him really bad, cut off his ears and tail. I've been taking care of him, but I'm scared the bad people are looking for him." He expected disbelief or dismissal. Instead, Ms. Rivera's face paled, her expression shifting from concern to something harder to read. "Can you show me?" she asked quietly. 20 minutes later, they stood before the fallen tree, Ethan calling softly to Warrior, who emerged slowly, still cautious around strangers. Ms. Rivera gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. But what happened next surprised Ethan completely. Instead of the horror or pity he expected, Ms. Rivera knelt down and spoke directly to Warrior, in a tone of voice Ethan had never heard her use before. "Echo, Sierra, Tango," she said clearly, making a subtle hand gesture at the same time. Warrior, who had been wary of Ms. Rivera's approach, suddenly stood at attention, his posture changing completely despite his injuries. His eyes locked onto Ms. Rivera with an intensity that made Ethan step back. "Ms. Rivera?" Ethan questioned, suddenly unsure if bringing her had been a good idea after all. She turned to him, her expression serious but kind. "Ethan, you've done something amazing here, something most adults wouldn't have had the courage to do." She looked back at Warrior. "This isn't just any dog. This is a military working dog, a very special one, from the looks of it." "How do you know?" Ethan asked, moving closer again, curiosity overcoming his momentary doubt. "Because I used to work with them," she replied. "Before I started teaching, I was a veterinary technician in the Army. I worked with dogs just like this one." As she gestured toward Warrior, who had relaxed his stance but was watching her, with clear recognition of her commands. "Those hand signals I just used? They're specialized commands only certain military dogs are trained to recognize." For the first time since finding Warrior, Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. He wasn't alone in this anymore, and better yet, he had found exactly the right person to help. "Can you fix him?" he asked, hope creeping into his voice. Ms. Rivera examined Warrior more closely, her trained eyes assessing the wounds with professional detachment. "You've done an amazing job with the first aid, Ethan. Really impressive. But yes, he needs proper medical attention." Her fingers found the strange object Ethan had discovered beneath the skin. "And this is very interesting." "What is it?" Ethan asked, watching as Warrior allowed Ms. Rivera to examine him without resistance. "It's a tracking chip, but not a standard one pet owners use." She frowned. "This is military grade, only used for high-value assets." She continued her examination, finding the collar and partially visible tag. "And this confirms it. I think this might be Major, a specialized detection dog who went missing during a training exercise about a month ago. There was a bulletin about it." Ethan's eyes widened. "I guessed his name. I tried different names and he responded to Major, but I still call him Warrior because of how brave he is." Ms. Rivera smiled. "Warrior is a perfect name, too." Her smile faded as she looked more closely at the deliberate injuries. "Ethan, whoever did this, they knew exactly what they were doing. These aren't random acts of cruelty. Someone wanted to disguise this dog, to make him unrecognizable." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. "The black truck," he whispered. "Warrior growls whenever it drives by. I think they're looking for him." Ms. Rivera's expression hardened. "That makes this even more serious." She looked thoughtfully at the USB drive Ethan had discovered in the collar's hidden compartment. "And this might explain why. Military working dogs don't usually carry data storage unless they're involved in something classified." "Like spy stuff?" Ethan asked, his imagination racing ahead. "Something like that," Ms. Rivera agreed, carefully pocketing the USB drive. "Ethan, we need to be very careful now. I have a contact, my former commanding officer, who needs to know about this, but we can't use phones or computers that might be monitored." The seriousness in her voice made the situation suddenly feel very real and very dangerous. Ethan glanced at Warrior, who seemed to understand the gravity of their conversation, his amber eyes alert and focused. "Are we in danger?" Ethan asked softly. Ms. Rivera hesitated, clearly weighing the benefits of honesty against frightening a 5-year-old. "I don't think anyone knows you're involved yet," she finally said. "But we need to be smart about this. For now, no one else can know about Warrior. Not your grandmother, not Mrs. Donovan, no one. And we need to move him somewhere safer than these woods." Ethan thought quickly. "There's an old garden shed behind my grandma's garage. No one uses it anymore. Could he stay there?" Ms. Rivera considered this. "That might work for now. It's close enough for us to check on him, but hidden from the road." She checked her watch. "We need to get you back home before your grandmother returns. But tonight, after dark, I'll come help you move Warrior. Can you meet me at the shed at 9 o'clock? Ethan nodded solemnly, accepting this new mission with all the seriousness it deserved. As they walked back toward the house, Ms. Rivera put a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "What you did for Warrior was extraordinary, Ethan. Most people, even adults, would have been too afraid or too indifferent to help. You saw someone suffering, and you did something about it. That kind of courage is rare." Her words warmed Ethan from the inside out, but he shook his head. "I was just doing what's right. Grandma says that's not special. It's just being human." Ms. Rivera smiled. "Your grandma sounds very wise." She squeezed his shoulder. "Tonight, then, 9 o'clock. And remember, not a word to anyone." That night, as Ethan waited for the clock to strike 9, he sat at his bedroom window, watching the street outside. The rain had returned, a steady drizzle that muffled sounds and blurred visibility, good for their secret mission, but also good for anyone who might be watching from the shadows. And someone was watching. Parked across the street, barely visible through the rain-streaked glass, was a black truck, its engine off but a faint red glow indicating a cigarette being smoked inside. Ethan's blood ran cold. They were here, at his house. But how? How had they found him? As if sensing his fear, the clouds parted briefly, allowing moonlight to illuminate the truck's license plate. Ethan quickly grabbed his notebook and pencil, writing down the numbers and letters before the clouds closed again. He didn't know if this information would help, but it felt important to record it. 9 o'clock came, and Ethan slipped out of his room, past Grandma Ellie's door, where soft snoring indicated she was deep in sleep after another exhausting shift. The house creaked around him as he made his way to the back door, each sound amplified by his heightened senses. Outside, the rain had increased to a steady downpour. Ethan pulled his yellow raincoat tighter around him and dashed across the yard to the dilapidated garden shed. Its weathered wooden walls and rusted metal roof didn't look like much, but it was dry inside, and, most importantly, hidden from the street by the garage in a line of overgrown shrubs. Ms. Rivera was already there, wearing dark clothes and a practical rain jacket. She had brought supplies, proper veterinary bandages, medications, a soft dog bed, food and water bowls, and a battery-powered lantern that cast a warm glow around the small space. "The black truck is outside my house," Ethan whispered, water dripping from his raincoat onto the dusty floor. Ms. Rivera's expression tightened. "I saw it. That's why I parked 2 blocks away and came through the alley." She knelt to Ethan's level. "We need to move quickly. Are you ready to get Warrior?" Ethan nodded, and together they set out into the rain-soaked night. 2 shadows moving through the darkness on a mission to save a warrior who had already endured more than any creature should. The journey through the rain-drenched woods was treacherous. Twice Ethan slipped on the muddy path, and once Ms. Rivera had to catch him before he tumbled down a small ravine. The forest that had seemed merely mysterious by day was transformed into something otherworldly by night, tree branches reaching like skeletal fingers, shadows shifting and dancing in the beam of Ms. Rivera's flashlight. "Almost there," Ethan whispered, his small voice nearly lost beneath the drumming of rain on leaves. When they reached the fallen tree, Ethan called softly, "Warrior, it's me, Ethan. I brought help." For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then, a faint whine and the stuffed dinosaur moved as Warrior emerged from his shelter, soaking wet despite Ethan's makeshift tent. "Good boy," Ms. Rivera said in that special tone she'd used before. She approached slowly, hands visible, movements deliberate. Warrior watched her warily, but allowed her to slip a makeshift harness over his head, something she'd fashioned from medical supplies. "He's too weak to walk all the way," she explained to Ethan, "and too heavy for me to carry alone." From her backpack, she produced a small collapsible cart, the kind used for gardening. "This will have to do. Help me get him on it." Together, they gently lifted Warrior onto the cart. The dog whimpered once, but otherwise remained stoically silent, those intelligent amber eyes watching everything. Ethan retrieved his now soaked stuffed dinosaur and placed it beside Warrior, who immediately pressed his nose against the familiar object. "Ready?" Ms. Rivera asked, positioning herself to pull the cart. The return journey was slower, more difficult with their precious cargo. Every bump in the path seemed magnified, every distant sound a potential threat. When they finally reached the edge of the woods behind Ethan's house, Ms. Rivera held up a hand for them to stop. "Wait here," she whispered, disappearing into the shadows. Ethan crouched beside the cart, one hand resting protectively on Warrior. "We're almost home," he promised. "You'll be dry and safe soon." Minutes stretched like hours before Ms. Rivera returned, her expression grim. "The truck is still there, but I think there's only one person inside. We'll have to be very careful. Stay in the shadows and move quickly when I say." They skirted the edge of the property, using the garage and overgrown shrubs as cover. The rain worked in their favor, providing both concealment and masking any sounds from their awkward procession. Finally, they reached the garden shed, slipping inside with their precious cargo. Ms. Rivera immediately went to work, making Warrior comfortable on the dog bed she'd brought, while checking his wounds with professional efficiency. "You've done an amazing job with these injuries, Ethan. They're actually healing quite well considering the circumstances." Pride swelled in Ethan's chest. "I watched how Grandma takes care of cuts. She's really good at it because she works at a hospital." "Well, she taught you well?" Ms. Rivera administered an injection, something for pain, she explained, and replaced Ethan's makeshift bandages with proper medical dressings. Throughout the procedure, Warrior remained calm, those amber eyes never leaving Ethan's face, as if drawing strength from the boy's presence. "I need to examine this tracking chip more carefully," Ms. Rivera said, gently probing the strange object beneath Warrior's skin. "And I want to look at what's on that USB drive, but not here, not now. It's too risky." She checked her watch. "It's getting late, Ethan. You need to get back inside before your grandmother checks on you." "But what about Warrior?" Ethan protested. "I can't leave him alone." "He won't be alone. I'm going to stay here tonight," Ms. Rivera assured him, gesturing to a small camping chair she'd set up in the corner. "I'll keep watch and make sure he's comfortable. Tomorrow, I'll contact my former commanding officer about what we've found." Ethan hesitated, torn between his responsibility to Warrior and the knowledge that his absence would eventually be discovered. "Promise you'll stay all night?" "I promise." Ms. Rivera's dark eyes were serious. "And tomorrow, after your lesson, we'll check on him together, okay?" Reluctantly, Ethan agreed. He knelt beside Warrior one last time, gently stroking the dog's head between his mutilated ears. "Good night, Warrior. I'll see you tomorrow." As Ethan crept back into the house, carefully locking the door behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted. What had begun as a simple act of kindness, a boy helping an injured dog, had somehow transformed into something much bigger and potentially dangerous. The black truck, the specialized tracking chip, the USB drive, pieces of a puzzle Ethan couldn't quite see yet, but which felt increasingly ominous. Sleep came fitfully that night, punctuated by dreams of shadowy figures and Warrior's intelligent, pain-filled eyes. When dawn finally broke, Ethan was already awake, anxious to check on his friend. Grandma Ellie was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when Ethan appeared, dressed and ready for the day unusually early. "Well, aren't you a morning bird today?" she said, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. Dark circles underlined her eyes, evidence of another exhausting shift. But her smile was warm and genuine. "Any special plans?" "Just want to play outside before it gets too hot," Ethan repeated, trying to sound casual, while avoiding a direct lie. Ellie studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "You've been spending a lot of time outdoors lately, making friends with the neighbor kids?" "Something like that," Ethan mumbled, focusing intently on his pancakes. Ellie set a glass of orange juice before him. "You know you can tell me anything, right, sunshine? Anything at all." For a brief, tempting moment, Ethan considered telling her everything, about finding Warrior, about the black truck, about Ms. Rivera staying overnight in their garden shed. But the memory of Warrior's reaction to the truck stopped him. Whatever was happening, it was dangerous, and Ethan couldn't risk putting his grandmother in harm's way. "I know, Grandma," he said instead, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything's good, I promise." After breakfast, Ethan waited impatiently for Mrs. Donovan to doze off in front of her morning soap operas before slipping out the back door. His heart raced as he approached the garden shed, both eager and afraid of what he might find. Ms. Rivera sat in the camping chair, looking remarkably alert despite her night vigilance. Warrior lay on the dog bed, his bandages clean and white against his dark fur. At Ethan's entrance, the dog's head lifted and the stump of his tail moved in greeting. "He had a good night," Ms. Rivera reported. "No fever, which is excellent news. And he ate a little breakfast." Relief washed over Ethan as he knelt beside Warrior, receiving a gentle lick on his hand. "Did you see the truck leave?" Ms. Rivera's expression darkened. "Yes, around dawn. But they'll be back, Ethan. People who do this kind of thing don't give up easily." "What kind of thing?" Ethan asked, sensing there was much more to this story than he understood. Ms. Rivera hesitated, clearly weighing how much to share with a 5-year-old. "I think Warrior, Major, was part of a special program. Military working dogs are incredibly valuable, especially ones with specific training. I think someone wanted to repurpose him for their own interests." "You mean steal him?" Ethan clarified, his young mind translating adult speak. "Essentially, yes. And the USB drive we found might tell us why." She sat forward in her chair. "I took a quick look at it this morning on a secure laptop. It contains files, records of some kind of experimental training program. It looks like Major was part of it, but something went wrong." "What kind of training?" Ethan asked, absently stroking Warrior's head. "I'm not sure yet. The files are partially encrypted. I've sent what I could access to my former commanding officer, Captain Ramirez." She checked her watch. "I need to go home and clean up before our tutoring session this afternoon, but I'll be back. Can you check on Warrior around lunchtime? Just make sure he has water and that his bandages aren't soaked through." Ethan nodded solemnly, accepting this responsibility like a sacred duty. As Ms. Rivera gathered her things to leave, he asked the question that had been nagging at him all night. "Ms. Rivera, are we in danger? Real danger?" She paused at the door, her expression grave. "I don't know yet, Ethan, but we're going to be very careful until we figure this out. That's why no one else can know about Warrior right now, okay?" After she left, Ethan spent a precious half-hour with Warrior, talking softly about everything and nothing. The dog listened with unnerving intelligence, those amber eyes following Ethan's every movement. Despite his injuries, Warrior seemed stronger today, holding his head higher, occasionally attempting to shift positions on his own. "You're getting better," Ethan observed happily. "Soon you'll be running around like normal dogs." Warrior made a small noise, not quite a bark, more like a vocalization of agreement. Then, unexpectedly, the dog struggled to his feet, wobbly and clearly in pain, but standing nonetheless. Ethan gasped in delight. "You did it! You're standing!" Warrior took one shaky step toward Ethan, then another. Each movement was obviously difficult, but the determination in those amber eyes was unmistakable. When he reached Ethan, Warrior pressed his head against the boy's chest in a gesture so full of trust and affection that Ethan felt tears spring to his eyes. "You're the bravest dog ever," he whispered, carefully wrapping his arms around Warrior's neck in a gentle hug. The moment was broken by the distant sound of a car door slamming. Warrior's head jerked up, his entire body tensing. A low growl emerged from deep in his chest, a warning. Ethan felt it before he heard it, the vibration passing from dog to boy like an electric current. "What is it?" Ethan whispered, moving to the small, grimy window of the shed. From this vantage point, he could just see the front of his house and the street beyond. The black truck had returned, parked in the same spot as before, but this time, someone was getting out. A tall man in dark clothing, who moved with confident purpose toward the Miller house. Ethan's blood ran cold as the stranger knocked on the front door. Mrs. Donovan would answer. Would she mention Ethan? Would she say he was playing in the backyard? Warrior growled again, louder this time, his hackles rising despite his injuries. "Shh," Ethan urged, though his own heart was racing. "We have to be quiet." Through the window, Ethan watched as Mrs. Donovan appeared at the door. The man showed her something, a badge perhaps, or a photo. They conversed briefly before Mrs. Donovan stepped aside, allowing the stranger to enter the house. "He's looking for me," Ethan whispered, panic rising in his throat. "Or for you, or both of us." Warrior pressed against Ethan's leg, steady despite his weakened state, offering strength through contact. The gesture calmed Ethan enough to think clearly. They needed to hide, really hide, until the man left and Ms. Rivera returned. The garden shed was small but cluttered with years of accumulated junk. Old flower pots, broken garden tools, dusty holiday decorations. In the far corner, partially hidden by a stack of empty planting trays, was a small storage cabinet. Ethan had explored it during previous adventures and knew it was just barely big enough for a small boy and a medium-sized dog to squeeze into. "Come on," he whispered to Warrior, gently guiding the dog toward their potential hiding place. "We need to disappear for a while." Getting Warrior into the cabinet was a challenge. The dog was still weak, and the space was cramped and dusty. But somehow they managed, with Ethan folded around Warrior's body, one arm draped protectively over the dog's back. He left the cabinet door slightly ajar, just enough for a sliver of light and a view of the shed's entrance. They didn't have to wait long. Less than 10 minutes later, Ethan heard footsteps approaching the shed. Heavy boots crunched on the gravel path, followed by the creak of the shed door being slowly pushed open. Sunlight flooded the small space as a large figure filled the doorway. From his hiding place, Ethan could see only the lower half of the intruder, dark pants tucked into combat-style boots. The man moved with calculated precision, searching methodically through the cluttered space. When he neared the cabinet, Warrior tensed beneath Ethan's arm, a silent growl vibrating through his body. "Shh," Ethan breathed, his lips barely moving. "Please, please be still." The boot stopped directly in front of the cabinet. A hand reached down, gloved fingers wrapping around the handle. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, certain they were about to be discovered. Then, miraculously, a phone rang. The man cursed softly and stepped back, answering the call. "Gray here," he said, his voice unexpectedly smooth and cultured. "No, nothing yet. Yes, I checked the house, just some old woman watching TV. No, the boy's not here, but there are signs he's been in the woods. I'll keep looking." He ended the call and, to Ethan's immense relief, walked out of the shed without opening the cabinet. Ethan counted to 100 before daring to peek out. The shed was empty, but they could still hear the man moving around the property, his footsteps circling the house. "We need to warn Ms. Rivera," Ethan whispered to Warrior. "She can't come back while he's still here." But how? Ethan had no phone, no way to reach her, and he didn't dare leave Warrior alone or risk being seen by the man called Gray. For the next hour, they remained hidden in the cabinet, Ethan's muscles cramping from the awkward position, Warrior's breathing warm against his neck. They listened as Gray returned to the shed 2 more times, each search more thorough than the last, though he never opened the cabinet. Finally, they heard the truck's engine start and fade into the distance. Still, Ethan waited another 20 minutes before carefully extracting himself and Warrior from their hiding place. His legs tingled painfully as blood flow returned, but he ignored the discomfort, helping Warrior back to the dog bed. "You were so brave," he told the dog, whose amber eyes seemed to hold a new level of alertness after their close call. "But we need to find a better hiding place. He'll come back, and next time he might look in the cabinet." As if understanding, Warrior struggled to his feet again and moved slowly toward the shed door, looking back at Ethan expectantly. "You want to leave?" Ethan asked, uncertain. "But where would we go?" Warrior whined softly, pawing at the door. "Okay," Ethan decided, trusting the dog's instincts. "But we need to be really careful." He cracked the shed door, peering out to ensure the yard was empty before helping Warrior outside. The dog moved with surprising purpose, heading not toward the house or the road, but toward a dense thicket of blackberry bushes that marked the boundary between Grandma Ellie's property and the undeveloped land beyond. "There?" Ethan asked dubiously, eyeing the thorny barrier. Warrior responded by carefully pushing through a narrow gap between bushes that Ethan hadn't noticed before. Following cautiously, Ethan discovered a small clearing on the other side, completely hidden from view by the surrounding thicket. It was as if nature had created a perfect secret room just for them. "This is amazing," Ethan breathed, looking around at their new sanctuary. "No one would find us here." Warrior settled himself on a patch of soft moss, looking satisfied with his discovery. Ethan sat beside him, mind racing with plans. They would need to move Warrior's bed and supplies here. They would need to tell Ms. Rivera about their close call with Gray. And somehow, they needed to figure out what was on that USB drive and why it was so important. As if reading his thoughts, Warrior rested his head on Ethan's lap, those intelligent eyes gazing up with what could only be described as trust. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, Ethan felt a surge of determination. He had made a promise to protect this dog, and he would keep it, no matter what. From somewhere nearby, a bird called out a warning. A shadow passed briefly over the clearing as a cloud obscured the sun. And in that moment, both boy and dog sensed the same thing. This was just the beginning of their ordeal, and the real challenges still lay ahead. What will Ethan and Warrior discover next? Do you think the mysterious man Gray will find their new hiding place? Share your thoughts in the comments. Ms. Rivera arrived for Ethan's afternoon tutoring session exactly on time, as always. But today, her usual warm smile was replaced by a tense, preoccupied expression. She barely glanced at the worksheets she'd prepared, her dark eyes constantly darting to the windows. "Ms. Rivera?" Ethan asked softly, after several minutes of distracted instruction. "Are you okay?" She snapped back to attention, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry, Ethan. I'm just a little tired today." Ethan leaned closer across the kitchen table, lowering his voice even though they were alone in the house. "He was here. The man with the black truck. He called himself Gray." Ms. Rivera's face paled. "When?" she demanded, all pretense of a normal lesson abandoned. "This morning. He came to the door and talked to Mrs. Donovan. Then he searched everywhere, even the shed." Ethan explained their narrow escape and the new hiding place Warrior had found. "I think he was looking for the USB drive." Ms. Rivera took a deep breath, visibly composing herself. "Ethan, I need to show you something." She pulled out her tablet and opened a secured folder. "This is Vincent Gray. Is this the man you saw?" Ethan studied the photograph, a military-style portrait of a handsome man in his 40s with cold, calculating eyes. "That's him. Who is he?" "He's the head trainer at a private military contractor facility called Nexus Operations. They do specialized training for working dogs, among other things." Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "The files on the USB drive show that he's been running an experimental training program using extremely cruel methods." "Is that why he hurt Warrior?" Ethan asked, his small hands curling into fists. "Partly, but there's more." Ms. Rivera hesitated, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. "The files also contain evidence that Gray has been involved in selling specialized military technology to unauthorized parties. Very dangerous, very illegal activities." Ethan's eyes widened. So, Warrior is like a witness? Ms. Rivera looked impressed by his quick understanding. Exactly. Major, Warrior, was likely carrying evidence that could put Gray away for a very long time. That's why he mutilated him, to make him unrecognizable, to erase his identity. The cruelty of it made Ethan's stomach twist. What do we do now? I've contacted my former commanding officer, Captain Ramirez. He's looking into the situation, but it will take time to mobilize proper resources. Until then, we need to keep Warrior safe and hidden. She checked her watch. Take me to this new hiding place. We need to move his supplies there before Gray returns. Under the pretense of continuing their lesson outdoors, they gathered Warrior's bedding, medical supplies, and food containers from the shed. Moving everything to the hidden clearing was challenging. They had to be careful not to create an obvious path through the blackberry thicket, but by the time they finished, Warrior had a comfortable, well-supplied sanctuary. The dog seemed to approve, wagging his tail stump as they arranged his bed beneath the natural canopy formed by arching blackberry canes. His wounds were healing remarkably well, and he moved with increasing confidence despite his injuries. He's responding to the antibiotics, Ms. Rivera observed professionally, though her tone couldn't hide the affection she'd developed for Warrior. The infections are clearing up. He's a fighter. That's why I named him Warrior, Ethan said proudly, scratching behind what remained of the dog's ears. As they worked, Ms. Rivera explained more about what she'd discovered. The tracking chip in Warrior's neck is definitely military grade, designed to transmit his location to authorized handlers. But it seems Gray modified it. Is that how he found us? Ethan asked anxiously. I don't think so. I disabled the chip this morning while you were at breakfast. She showed Ethan a small electronic device. This blocks any remaining signals. Gray is likely tracking us through more conventional means, watching the house, following movement patterns. Like a real spy, Ethan whispered, both terrified and slightly thrilled by the idea. This isn't a game, Ethan, Ms. Rivera said gently but firmly. Gray is dangerous, not just to Warrior, but potentially to anyone who gets in his way. That sobering thought hung between them as they finished securing the hideout. As they walked back toward the house, Ms. Rivera suddenly stopped, gripping Ethan's shoulder. Ethan, does your grandmother own a smartphone, a laptop? Yeah, both. Why? Gray might try to access your home network, monitor your communications. She knelt to his level. From now on, we need to be extremely careful about what we say on phones or computers. If you need to reach me urgently, use this. She pressed a small device into his hand, a simple pager-like object with a single button. It's an emergency beacon. One press and I'll know you need help. But only use it in a real emergency, okay? Ethan nodded solemnly, tucking the device into his pocket. The weight of it felt significant, a physical reminder of the danger they faced. That evening, as Ethan helped his grandmother prepare dinner, he struggled to maintain a facade of normality. Every car that passed made him tense. Every unexpected sound sent his heart racing. Grandma Ellie noticed his jumpiness, but attributed it to too much sugar or excitement about his lessons with Ms. Rivera. You really like her, don't you? Ellie observed as they washed dishes together. She's smart, Ethan replied honestly, and she listens to me, not like I'm just a kid. Ellie dried her hands on a towel, studying her grandson thoughtfully. That's important. Being heard. She sighed, a flash of sadness crossing her features. I know I haven't been as present as I should be, Sunshine. The hospital keeps me so busy, and after your parents... It's okay, Grandma, Ethan interrupted, unable to bear the guilt in her voice. I know you're doing your best. Ellie pulled him into a tight hug, her voice slightly muffled against his hair. I love you more than anything in this world, Ethan Miller. Don't you ever forget that. Something in her tone, in the fierceness of her embrace, made Ethan wonder if she suspected something was wrong. But she asked no questions, demanded no explanations, just held him a moment longer than usual, before releasing him with a smile. How about some ice cream before bed? Our little secret. Later, lying in bed with a stomach pleasantly full of chocolate ice cream, Ethan found sleep elusive. His mind raced with all he'd learned, about Gray, about the illegal activities at Nexus Operations, about the danger they faced. Outside his window, the night seemed alive with potential threats. Just as he was finally drifting off, a soft tapping sound jolted him fully awake. For a panicked moment, he thought Gray had returned. Then he recognized the pattern. 3 quick taps, a pause, 2 more. Ms. Rivera's signal. Slipping quietly from his bed, Ethan peered out of the window to see Ms. Rivera crouched in the shadows of the backyard, urgently motioning him to come outside. Fear gripped him. Something was wrong. With practiced stealth born from days of secret missions, Ethan navigated through the sleeping house and out the back door. Ms. Rivera immediately pulled him into the deeper shadows beside the garage. "What's wrong?" Ethan whispered, heart pounding. "Warrior is gone," she replied, her voice tight with worry. "I went to check on him after receiving some information from Captain Ramirez, but the hiding place was empty." "But he can barely walk properly," Ethan protested. "He couldn't have gone far." "I don't think he left on his own." Ms. Rivera's face was grim in the dim moonlight. There were signs of a struggle, broken branches, disturbed earth. Cold fear washed over Ethan. Gray found him. Maybe, but something doesn't add up. She showed Ethan her tablet, which displayed a map with a blinking dot. "I secretly placed a backup tracker on Warrior's collar, separate from the military chip. According to this, he's not far, just beyond the creek in the woods." "We have to find him," Ethan declared, already moving toward the tree line. Ms. Rivera caught his arm. "Ethan, it could be a trap. Gray might be using Warrior to lure us out." "I don't care," Ethan said firmly, with a conviction that belied his 5 years. "I promised Warrior I wouldn't let anyone hurt him again." Ms. Rivera studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but we do this carefully. Stay close to me, and if I tell you to run, you run. No questions, no arguments. Deal?" "Deal," Ethan agreed. Armed with flashlights and Ms. Rivera's strange military confidence, they set out into the woods. The night was unnervingly quiet. No owls calling, no creatures rustling in the underbrush. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. They followed the tracker's signal to a small clearing near the creek, not far from where Ethan had first discovered Warrior. The blinking dot indicated they were close, but the clearing appeared empty. "I don't understand," Ms. Rivera murmured, scanning the area with her flashlight. "He should be right here." Ethan's eyes, sharp and unbiased by adult expectations, caught what Ms. Rivera missed, a small tuft of fur caught on a low-hanging branch. "There! Something's under that fallen tree." They approached cautiously. Sure enough, partially concealed beneath the massive trunk was Warrior's collar, the backup tracker still attached, but no sign of the dog himself. "They removed his collar, but left the tracker," Ms. Rivera realized aloud. "They wanted us to find this place." "But why?" Ethan asked, confused and increasingly frightened. The answer came in the form of a low, cultured voice from the shadows behind them. "Because I needed to have a little chat with you both." They whirled around to find Vincent Gray stepping into the clearing, flanked by another man whose military bearing mirrored Ms. Rivera's. Both carried sidearms, though they weren't directly pointed at Ethan and Ms. Rivera. "Where's Warrior?" Ethan demanded, fear temporarily overridden by concern for his friend. Gray smiled, a smile that never reached his cold eyes. "The animal is secure, for now." Ms. Rivera shifted subtly, positioning herself between Ethan and the armed men. "What do you want, Gray?" "What I've always wanted, Rivera. The USB drive." He sneered slightly. "Did you think we wouldn't identify you? Former Army veterinary technician with high-level clearance and a rather inconvenient moral compass. You were flagged the moment you accessed secure databases." "Where is Warrior?" Ethan repeated, his small voice steady despite his fear. Gray regarded the child with something like curiosity. "You named it Warrior? How quaint." He sighed dramatically. "The dog is in my vehicle, alive but sedated. Whether he stays that way depends entirely on you two." "We don't have the drive anymore," Ms. Rivera said coldly. "It's already been sent to proper authorities." "A convenient lie," Gray replied. "Our sources confirm that Captain Ramirez is still in Washington. No official action has been taken." His smile thinned. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me the drive, and I'm going to leave with my property. You two will forget this unfortunate incident, and everyone lives happily ever after." "He's not your property," Ethan said fiercely. "He's not an it either. He's Warrior, and he's my friend." Gray laughed, a hollow, unpleasant sound. "The naivety of children. That animal cost the government over $100,000 to train. It's an asset, nothing more." "An asset you tortured," Ms. Rivera spat. The evidence on that drive shows exactly what you did to those dogs, and what you've been selling to unauthorized parties. Gray's amusement vanished, replaced by cold calculation. Final offer, the drive for the dog. You have 10 seconds to decide. Ethan looked up at Ms. Rivera, panic rising in his chest. We have to help Warrior. Ethan, she said quietly, maintaining eye contact with Gray, do you remember where we put the dinosaur? The strange question momentarily confused him, until he realized she was speaking in code. Rex, his stuffed dinosaur, was still with Warrior's supplies in the blackberry thicket, but what did that have to do with anything? Then he remembered, when moving Warrior's supplies, Ms. Rivera had tucked something into Rex's stuffing. The USB drive. Yes, he whispered, I remember. Time's up, Gray announced. I see we'll need to do this the hard way. He nodded to his companion, who drew his weapon more deliberately. What happened next unfolded with dizzying speed. Ms. Rivera suddenly dropped to one knee, shouting a phrase Ethan didn't understand, but the effect was immediate. From the darkness behind Gray came a blur of motion, a large form launching itself at the armed men with military precision. Warrior, moving far better than seemed possible given his injuries, attacked with silent, calculated aggression. He didn't bark or growl, he simply executed what was clearly specialized training, knocking the second man to the ground, while Gray struggled to draw his weapon. Run, Ethan! Ms. Rivera shouted, using the distraction to pull her own concealed handgun. But Ethan couldn't move, frozen in place as Warrior, his gentle, injured friend, transformed into something else entirely. A precision military asset doing exactly what he'd been trained to do. Gray managed to fire a single shot that went wide before Warrior clamped powerful jaws around his gun arm. The man screamed, dropping the weapon as Ms. Rivera aimed her own gun steadily. Stand down, Gray, she ordered. It's over. Gray's companion had regained his footing, but wisely remained still, hands raised in surrender. Gray himself, clutching his bleeding arm, glared with undisguised hatred. You have no idea what you're interfering with, he snarled. This goes far beyond some mistreated dogs. I know exactly what I'm interfering with, Ms. Rivera replied coldly. International arms trafficking disguised as a training program, using military animals as cover for selling classified weapons technology. Warrior maintained his position, amber eyes locked on Gray's every movement, awaiting further commands. Despite his mutilated ears and missing tail, there was nothing pitiful about him now, only power, purpose, and deadly competence. Ethan, Ms. Rivera said without taking her eyes off the men, there's a zip tie in my right pocket. Get it, please. Moving as if in a dream, Ethan retrieved the plastic restraint. Under Ms. Rivera's instructions, he secured Gray's companion's hands behind his back. Ms. Rivera did the same to Gray, who continued to curse and threaten until she ordered Warrior to stand guard, a command the dog obeyed immediately, positioning himself to watch both captives with unwavering attention. How did you know? Ethan asked, still trying to process what had happened. How did you know Warrior would help us? I didn't know for sure, Ms. Rivera admitted, but I suspected. The way he responded to certain commands, his physical capabilities despite his injuries. He's not just any military dog, Ethan. Major is a specialized operations K9, trained for high-risk missions, including hostage situations. But I thought he was hurt too badly to fight, Ethan said, watching in awe as Warrior maintained his vigilant position. His wounds are real, but healing, and training like his doesn't disappear, even with trauma. She squeezed Ethan's shoulder. He wasn't just protecting himself tonight. He was protecting you. The significance of that Warrior had formed such a bond with him in such a short time, made Ethan's chest tighten with emotion. He wanted to run to the dog, to hug him close, but he understood that right now, Warrior was working. Ms. Rivera used a satellite phone to contact Captain Ramirez, speaking in clipped, military phrases that Ethan only partially understood. When she finished, she turned to Ethan with a grim smile. Help is on the way, but we're not out of danger yet. There are likely others from Nexus who will come looking when Gray doesn't report in. What about Grandma? Ethan asked suddenly, fear gripping him anew. If they know about us, they know about her. Ms. Rivera's expression confirmed his fears. You're right. We need to get her somewhere safe. She thought for a moment. Here's the plan. We secure these two, then get back to the house. Wake your grandmother, pack only essentials, and leave immediately. I have a family cabin in the mountains where we can lay low until Captain Ramirez and his team